Today we're going to start at the end of 14a. 3 lines from the bottom. Taner Rabbanan. Thank Hashem. That's very much to learn every day. In the of our learning. Should have the base of Migdash immediately. Okay, we start with Taner Rabbanan, and we'll start in a brisa. Brisa says, "Ezo almanas isa." What is this widow of a mixture? We call it like a chalent. That there's a complication in what her status is as a widow. Yesterday we learned that her husband's mother was divorced with a get that was thrown to the wife, but it was in between the husband and her. It was 50-50. It was a doubt if she was really divorced. But then the husband subsequently died. And so now she's definitely not married to him, either because of divorce or she's a widow. She marries a Kohen, which is problematic if she was divorced. They have a child, which is now the husband of this wife. Now this child died. This is the widow that we spoke about before. And we said that wasn't an issue. It was Almana Sisa. We had a statement that she was kosher, right? Wasn't that our statement? Hayed. It's a testimony that she's permissible to kuna. What was the logic that we gave to that? We said maybe because she checks. Or maybe we said that it was really a sveka. We had different options there, but one of the things that we said yesterday was that it could be that she married the mother of the chassan, who's now passed away, had married the second husband, the Kayan, within 3 months of the death or divorce of the first husband, which means that it's a doubt if the child is from the first husband, the second husband. 2 doubts over there. Okay. The Brisa says, what's almanas? So we say, Kol she'im b'leimim mishum mamzeirus v'leim mishum nesinas v'leim mishum abdei malachim. We can't have other doubts mixed into that. Well, maybe he's also with this, maybe he's also that. We're going to see exactly how this is playing out. The Gemara is going to discuss if they accuse him, not accuse. If they tell him that he's a mamzer, they call him a mamzer. How does he respond? Does he say, "Oh no, I'm not," or is he just quiet? That's going to make a difference here. We'll see. But whatever the case is, he doesn't have these other issues. But it's not be a mamzer, just maybe be a non-Kohen, right? Right. It would affect his marrying a kuna, right? So Amar Reb Meir, we'll see. Reb Meir says, "Shemati kol shem bechen mikalela masin lekuna." I've heard that anyone that doesn't have any of those issues, what were those issues? Mamzer, nasin, or comes from slave lineage. The reason why he mentions that is because we had slaves like Hordus that made themselves part of the family, and he actually took over the kingdom, the Hashmonai kingdom. Well, Reb Meir says that if he doesn't have any of those things, then he's also kosher. Gemara is going to ask that Reb Meir is not saying anything different than the Tanakama. That's exactly what the Tanakama said. That if you don't have the other issues, he's kosher. Reb Meir says he's kosher. So we don't need another name to add to that. That's usually not how the Gemara works. So the Gemara is going to ask that. Reb Shimon ben Elazar, Reb Meir. Reb Shimon ben Elazar is a student of Reb Meir. He says in his teacher's name, Reb Shimon ben Menashe Reb Shimon ben Menashe also says like this, that what? What's an almanasisa? This questionable widow. What's the case? Well, we have a suffix chalal that's mixed into this. And the issue is that makir nisrael mamzerin shebineim ve'im makir chol shebineim. If it would be a mamzer, we would know for sure. A suffix mamzer would be kosher because we know who's a mamzer. But a suffix halal, that we are not really sure about, which sounds like it's possible. So here we're getting that a almanas isa is going to be a suffix halal. Maybe it has to be a specific type of suffix halal, but a regular suffix halal would be possible.
Is there rabbinic
Is there a rabbinic mamzer? I mean, because of like the shnias or something? Because the forbidden relation would have turned into a suffix. But I think we have a lima that suffix vadai is aser and not a suffix chal. I think we learned that from a pasuk or something. Even though we saw it other times not like that, but okay. The Gemara is going to explain what we just said because it's a little bit cryptic. First of all, Reb Meir seems to be saying the same thing as the Tanakama, and then Reb Shimon ben Elazar, in the name of Reb Meir, seems to be saying the opposite, that a suffix halal is going to be aser. Okay, Amar Mar are the introductory words when we go back and analyze something that was said by Tanoim, authors of Mishnah or Brisa. It says Ezel Manasisa. We're restating what we said and we're going to analyze it. It can't have those issues of mamzer, nasin. Mamzer, we said, that comes from a close family relation, or maybe with a married woman, and the child, an offspring from that. And nasin, we said what it was. Those are the tribe that which Shaul HaMelech, or Avdei Malachim means they really come from the servants, the slaves, and not really from the family. It's like not Jewish. But if there would be an issue of a chalal, then it would be kosher. The Gemara asks, question number one. It's going to have to be three questions here. Why are you being strict about those cases? Because they're biblical laws. I don't even know if nasin is a biblical law. But chalal is also deraisa, that a kohen is not allowed to marry a chalala. It's also biblical law. Why over here you're strict and over there you're lenient? If it in the case of a doubt. Question two. Reb Meir that says if you don't have one of those issues, then they can marry a kohen. That's exactly what the Tanakama said. Make it look like there's a machlekes here when they're saying the same thing. Question number three. Reb Shimon ben Elazar, Reb Meir v'chin Shimon ben Asiyam kedvarav, Ezuel manasisa kol shnit masav kol makin yisam mamzer shebenei makin chalalim shebenei. That we would know if it would have been a mamzer, and therefore it's definitely not. But if it's a chalal, someone that can't marry a kohen, that we wouldn't know, and that creates a problem. Bar mitresha chalal kasher. But we said originally that if it's a problem of a chalal, we said that it's kosher. Now it seems to be saying exactly the opposite. Rabbi Yechanan gives us an answer. Amar Rabbi Yechanan, but he has to throw in another factor here. That with this factor, we're able to differentiate between what the Tanakama holds, what Reb Meir holds, and what Reb Shimon ben Elazar holds in the name of Reb Meir. What's that factor? He says, Mamzer tzavach v'chol sheisek ekabinayo. The difference is, if he's called a mamzer, and he protests against it. He says, no, I'm not. And chalal sheisek. He's called a chalal, but he's quiet. Doesn't say anything. That's going to be the difference. Somehow this is going to tell us what his status is. Okay, let's take a look. You would think that there would be different people react differently to different. Let's see. It says Tanakama Savar. The Tanakama holds that kol pasal the karale b'shasik is pasal. When a person's quiet, when he's being accused of having a certain lineage, that's because he's admitting. He doesn't say anything. It's okay. Interesting. V'achi kamer Tanakama. This is what the Tanakama is saying. Ezu almanasisa. When do we say that there's an almanasisa, which we said that she was permitted to get married? Well, obviously, kol shein b'leishtuk mamzeres, leishtuk nesinus, leishtuk avdei malachim, leishtuk chalal. This person could not have been quiet when he was accused of being either a mamzer, a nasin, or being a slave, and if he's accused of being a chalal. All of those cases, if he's quiet, then that would have been a sign that he was admitting, and then he would be pasal. So what is the almanasisa then? that we said was kosher. That was because that was a specific case that we knew that there was a doubt. But if there's a doubt that we are not aware of, by this Almanas Isa, we know of the doubt. And so we're not getting introduced to a new problem here that we're not aware of that we have to be careful with. By the Almanas Isa, we know that there's the doubt with the mother's divorce, that the get landed halfway in between. And we know the issue. We know why he's being quiet, so that would have been different. But if we're getting introduced to a new issue here because of his silence, that would be problematic. Kamalei Reb Meir, and Reb Meir says to this, Hanachu de kapasale bekal. You have to make a distinction here. If he's quiet when he's being accused of being a mamzer or the like, then what he's really saying is that he's never going to be allowed to marry anyone in the community. That must be that he's admitting. Aval shtuk chalal, but if he's quiet when he's called a chalal, he's still kosher. Why? It doesn't bother him to be a chalal. He wasn't planning on marrying. For a man, it doesn't matter anyway. He can marry even a daughter of a Kohen. So it really doesn't matter to him whether his children are going to be a chalal. It's just call, just don't call me late for dinner, right? It didn't affect him in any way that he was a chalal, so he didn't respond. So the silence about the chalal doesn't mean anything, according to Reb Meir's view. Kamalei Reb Shimon ben Elazar l'Tanakama, and Reb Shimon ben Elazar says back l'Tanakama to Reb Meir. It's not really a Tanakama. It's the first opinion that quotes Reb Meir. He says, "Ish mialach demachsher Reb Meir b'shtika." If you ever heard that Reb Meir says that he could be kosher, even though he was silent when he was being accused, it's not the case that you think. We just said that he was called a chalal and he's quiet, and Reb Meir says that doesn't mean that he's really a chalal. Just he doesn't care. It's exactly the opposite. If he's called a mamzer and he's quiet, that's where he's really kosher. Why? Okay. Why was he quiet? He was quiet because he says, look, there's a list of mamzerim. I'm not on the list, so it's not an issue. Everyone knows who's a mamzer and who's not. They're calling me a mamzer. They know it's not true. So he doesn't have to protest. It's just, should be careful. Somehow Lashon Hara goes, it's not always logical. So, Aval Mamzer Tzavach, but if he screams, right? Chalal v'shaisek, or he's a chalal, but he's quiet, that's already an issue. Why? Because then he's puzzled. Why was he quiet if it's an issue? He says, Savar Mistaidle Mafkle Makal. The reason why he's quiet now as a halal is because he's saying, well, I'm not being excluded from the congregation, so I don't have to Mistaya means it's enough. It's enough that I'm still part of the congregation, I can still get married. So he's not going to scream about that. Okay, so what comes out is like this, that we have three opinions here. If he's quiet from being called a mamzer, when he's being called a mamzer and he's quiet, so according to the first two opinions, that's a problem. But according to this last opinion of Reb Shimon ben Elazar, then that's not a problem if he's quiet, because he's relying on the list of mamzerim, he's not on it. However, if he's called a chalal, so according to the Tanakama, that's a problem. According to this last opinion, that's a problem, even if he's quiet, right? And according to Reb Meir said, no, if he's called a chalal, it wasn't an issue. Because he's quiet is not a sign of being of admitting. That's an interesting point over here. The first view of Reb Meir and the second view of Reb Meir have a difference in understanding why he's quiet. The first view is, it doesn't matter what they call me, it's not true anyway. But it doesn't bother me what they call me. I don't have to protest. And the second view is that he knows that they're right. He's just not crying out because, okay, that he can handle. Okay.
The first one, they know is wrong. They're wrong. The second one, they're right, but it doesn't matter.
Right. Okay. What are we holding? Tani Chada. We have one brisa that says Rabbi Yossi Emer Steak Mamzer Kosher Steak Chal Pasal. Rabbi Yossi is a student of Rabbi Akiva. He's a friend of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Akiva had these 5 famous students. So Rabbi Yossi's name is Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta. So we have a brisa that says Rabbi Yossi says if he's quiet about being called a mamzer, then he's kosher, which was actually Rabbi Meir's view. Why? Because he said there's a list. I'm not on the list. You call me what you want. I'm not on the list. Shteik chalal is pasul, but if he's called a chalal, no, I'm sorry. Shteik mamzer is kosher. That was the Reb Shimon ben Elazar's view of Reb Meir, that I'm not on the list, right? And shteik chalal is pasul. That was also Reb Shimon ben Elazar's view of Reb Meir. He's pasul because he's admitting. Why is he quiet? Because he just doesn't. He's satisfied with at least he can marry in the community. He doesn't have to protest. Tani Yidach, there's another brisa that says shteik chalal kosher, shteik mamzer pasul. Exactly the opposite. That if he's quiet from being a chalal, he's actually kosher. And if he's quiet from when he's called a mamzer, that's when he's pasul. That was the first view of Reb Meir. Yeah. So Gemara says like kasha. There's 2 views of what Reb Meir held, and Rabbi Yossi is being placed into either this one or to that one, and that's why it looks like a contradiction, but it's actually really 2 opinions. Okay. Now we have a new Mishnah. Amar Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says it's the same Rabbi Yossi from before. Yeah. Rabbi Yossi.
The argument that it's a list of sorry, it's a weaker argument is for all time. Maybe there was a list of mamzerim at the time, but over time it seems like that list would get weaker and weaker, and there's not a basis for anything.
Yeah, that's a good point. When we get to Kedushin, I'm not to say to get in Kedushin, we get to the end of this probably in about 2 years. There's a whole chapter over there of a list of which families had issues with them. It sounds like an old newspaper from 2,000 years ago, like old gossip. But anyway, yeah, you're right. Back then they actually had lists, and what happened today, it doesn't seem so relevant.
Like in the post office, there were the pictures that they wanted.
Right. Rabbi Yossi says, Ma'aseh b'tinaikas is a story of a girl. She went down to draw water from the spring. Benansa, and she was raped. Now the question is, who was the fellow? What's her status? It's not a good story. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri was a friend of Rabbi Akiva. He says, if most of the people of the city, majority of the people of the city, are people that would be eligible to marry a Kohen, they come their good lineage. So then we'll assume that the person that raped this girl was also from good lineage, and she did not become pasul.
Kohen raped her.
Yeah, or there wasn't necessarily a Kohen, but someone that could marry a Kohen. Not someone that could marry a Kohen. Someone that if it would have been a woman would have been able to marry a Kohen. That status. Okay. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri is being quoted here as giving the psak. Yeah. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri stood up for Rabbi Gamliel's honor after Rabbi Gamliel passed away. I think Rabbi Yeshua wanted to say something, and he protested. He said, no, Rabbi Gamliel already paskin. Then we have in Shabbos, we have Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri saying that if you don't allow this oil, if you don't allow that oil to be used for the candles, so what are the people from this city going to use? What are the people from that city going to use? They should be on the line of Rabbi Akiva.
Oh.
Off the chart. Okay, Amalei Rava Rav Nachman. Rava says to Rav Nachman. Nachman is older. Rav Nachman is a student of Rav and Shmuel.
So if the person forced relations on her was a non-kosher person, she's forbidden to the Kuna.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So Rabbi Yochanan, he asks like this. Rava says to Rav Nachman, he says, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, the Amar Kaman. Who's Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri following? Remember, we had several pages of this already. That if he claims, remember, who is this? What's the nature of this fetus? What's the nature of this man? And she says, oh, he's ish kayin ish plani v'kayin. So we had a machlekes, Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Eliezer versus Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua never believed her, and Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Eliezer always believed her. So it goes like this: Ikar Rabbi Gamliel, afila b'rei psulim nami machshir. If it's Rabbi Gamliel, then Rabbi Gamliel holds that you put the woman on her status. Her assumed status always was that she was kosher. We're not going to change it. That's why we always believed her.
And there's also a presumption that the woman doesn't know who it was.
Yeah, that's a missing point in the story. Like, what is she saying? I guess she doesn't know. But we're saying now that what was the logic of Rabbi Gamliel to trust her? Because she was anyways, she had a status that she was kosher. So until we know to change the status, we're not going to do it. So here also, we're not going to change the status just because we don't know. We don't know who it was. And we have a majority that says it was kosher. So we'll keep her on that status. Ikar Rabbi Yeshua, if it's Rabbi Yeshua, Afila B'reif Ksherim Nami Pasel. He said, no, we don't put her on that status, on the assumed status. We were saying that she was pasel. So what does that have to do with the majority? Rabbi Yeshua would always say that she's pasel, even if there's a majority that she's kosher. Majority of men here were kosher. And Rabbi Gamliel would say that she's kosher, even if there's majority that say that's pasel because of her status. Rabbi Gamliel would say that she's kosher, even if there's majority pasel. So why is this the issue? Amalei, Rav Nachman responds, Hachi Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Rav Yehuda says in the name of Rav, this is Rav Nachman talking, and he says, Bekrona shel tzipori haya maisa. The story that you're discussing with Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri was taking place during the market, during the fair that was in Tzipori. And at that time, there were travelers that were there also. And the Kudur Rabami, and it's following the view of Rabami. Now, what's happening here is that really, we wouldn't really trust her. Really, we wouldn't say that she's kosher. But because of a special scenario, even Rabbi Yeshua would agree that she's kosher. Because Rabami says, that if there is a group of travelers that are kosher, that are traveling through, then she's going to be kosher. And it's following the view of Rabbi Yanai. If someone that had relations in the market, she's kosher for kuna. The Gemara says, in the market then was wagons. The cartloads would show up, and I guess they would stop somewhere in the town square. But it's called kronis. A karin is the wagon.
Like a farmer's market.
Like a farmer's market. So in the wagons, that's really what happened. It says no. El nivelis b'shas kronis k'shir. Doesn't mean in the wagons. She had relations at the time when the wagons came in. Now, so what's happening now? What we're learning is that we have two majorities going on. I have majority of the city, which is kosher. I have majority of the people that are passing through that are kosher. Trey Ruby, it's called. Then we consider this woman kosher for kuna. Whichever way you look at it, she's kosher. But let's say we don't have the wagons here. It's just the city that most of the people are kosher. So then Hablad Shtuki, then we would say that the child is silenced. Means we don't know what the status is of the child. Before we were talking about her, it sounded like now we're talking about the child. But that was a discussion if her and the child are the same.
It's not a place where wagons come through. It's still the majority of people are kosher. Why
Yeah.
would that change it?
There's this special rule that we need two majorities. One majority here isn't enough.
But there's not people with wagons that go through. Is that the point? Or there's people with wagons go through that are not the majority?
No, we have two majorities. I have majority of the city,
Yeah.
plus I have the majority of the people of the wagons. that are also kosher.
But didn't you say it's a city where this is not a city where wagons go through?
No, it is a city. This is and if it's
Oh.
at the time of the wagons, then we can use that majority as well. Two majorities will say that it's,
Wagons do go through, it's just not a majority of those people. Okay.
no, it's both. It's the majority of the people in the city that are kosher and the majority of the wagons are kosher. And then we'll say that she's kosher. Right.
So if it's one is kosher and the second one is not, the wagon people aren't kosher.
That's for sure a problem.
That's real.
Yeah. What's the surprising thing here is that adding more people
Right.
and then giving them a majority, why does that affect the original majority that we had before we had those extra people?
Right.
Now, all we're doing is we're throwing in another factor and we're saying, don't worry about it. Right? But for some reason, that extra factor that don't worry about it is making it more kosher. Right? I mean, I had roiv kosher in the city itself. There were no travelers. But now I have travelers. They say, oh, those travelers, don't worry, the majority is also kosher. So, oh, two roivs, that's good.
But if the travelers weren't, let's say they're all gypsies, they're all on that.
That would be a problem.
Just a problem, or would it be
Invalid.
Invalidate the majority of the
Yeah.
people?
Kihad chiyasa Rav Dimi Amar Ziri. This is like what Rav Dimi said when Rav Dimi came. Rav Dimi was a traveler, and he said in the name of Ziri.
One of those travelers.
Yeah,
He was not a participant
he was right.
in the raid.
He was a traveler that brought the halachas from Eretz Yisrael to Babel. He said in the name of Ziri, that said in the name of Reb Chanina. Reb Chanina is an early sage in Israel. His name was Reb Chanina Bar Chama. He was really a student of Rebbe. But Amrila, and there are those that say that this wasn't brought by Rav Dimi, it was just brought by Ziri, it was just said by Ziri. Amar Ziri, Amar Reb Chanina. We followed the majority of the city, but we don't follow the majority of the travelers. Right. The Gemara says, 1 second, klapilaya. Klapilaya means you have to turn this around. This is illogical. It should be the other way. Hani naidi v'hani kvi v'kaimi. Okay, the rule is like this. I have a rule. Kol de parish, meruba parish. If I have a majority and something leaves that majority,
Right.
Remember the case with 9 stores? We did psachim together, right? So if you have 9 stores that selling kosher meat, and one sells not kosher meat. So if you find a piece of meat in front of those stores, then we assume that it's kosher because there's a majority that would say that it's kosher. But if I walked into a store and I bought a piece of meat, I walked back and go back to the car and I'm like, which store did I just go into? And I can't remember which store it was. It may have been the 10th store, which wasn't kosher. Then I have to say that it's a 50-50 chance. I look at every single store and say, was it this one? 50-50. Was it this one? 50-50. I don't look at all the stores together. Each one, and the rule is that kol kavua, anything that's established, that's set in its place, I view it as a 50-50. Anything that's left its established place, like that piece of meat, that's not, the doubt did not arise in the store. The doubt arose when it was outside of those stores. Then I view all the stores together and I look at the majority. But if the doubt arose on something that was established in the place itself, in its location.
There's a piece of meat outside the store, so we assume the majority.
Right.
But that's outside the store.
That's outside. But if I bought meat from a store, and I just don't remember which store I went into, they're all the same stalls, like, I can't remember, maybe it was the wrong one. So then that would be kavua, and the rule is kavua is kamech tel mechta is 50-50. So now, when I have people in the city, majority are kosher. What does that mean? Minority are not. And then I have travelers. Majority are kosher. So the travelers would be more of a reason to follow the majority than the people in the city. The people in the city are established. I have to look at each one saying that it's 50-50. But by the travelers, I should say that they're parish, they're moving, and I would say that that's it's not really moving away from where they are. Anyway, the Gemara says Klapilaya. Turn it. What are you telling me? Rabbi Hanina said that we follow the majority of the city, but we don't follow the travelers. It should be the opposite. The travelers have the rule of kol the parish, but the city is more established. The Gemara switches it. Ella rather I need both. I need the majority of the city, plus I need the majority of the travelers. I don't follow the city alone, the majority alone of the city, which is kosher. That's not good. And I don't follow the majority of the travelers alone. My time, what's the reason? Since I can't follow the majority of the city because that's kavua, so why can't I follow the majority of the travelers? Just like, let's say it was out there in the woods or whatever, and the travelers that happened to be passing by was for a certain Jewish fair or something. I'd say that that's also good. No, because if I would follow one type of majority, maybe I'll end up following the majority of the city. Nami, even in the city, there's another issue. Idika azli inhu legaba. If the man went and found the woman, then called the parish miruba parish, then we would say, well, he was one of the majority of the city that left his location and went to her. The whole problem is leitzricha the kaazla ihi legabayu. It was she that went to them, the havla kavua, because that fellow was in his location. We don't know which house it was, which. So then we'll say that's really our issue over here. Okay, the Gemara now asks me being on Trey Ruby, where do you get this from? That you need two majorities, the majority of the city. Where'd this come from? But Tanya, we have a brisa. We learned this in Pesachim. 9 stores sell kosher meat. One sells non-kosher meat. You bought from one of them any day. You don't know which one you went into. So we say that's a doubt. And each one has a suffix on it, 50-50 for each one. I don't throw them all in one lump and say, well, it's 9 out of 10. I don't do that. But if you find the meat that's already left the store, you find it in the front and that's square, you follow the majority. So our question is with.
What's the difference if it's in front of the store, if it's in your car? They're both outside the store.
Right.
So it doesn't change the status by being in the car. There's still a suffix. Why is the suffix different?
Because in which location did the doubt arise?
We don't know.
No. We don't know the solution to the doubt. But when it arose, when you approach, when did the doubt arise? You see a piece of meat on the floor. That's when you have the doubt of which store it came from. But when you walked into a store and you bought and you walked out, and now you don't know which store you were in, so the doubt really arose of this at the store itself. Now each store is a permanent location, so I can't view each store as included in all the other stores. It's where it originated, where did that originate? Right. Yeah. Many weeks in yeshiva are spent understanding this difference between.
There used to be a store here that's a little kosher, right? Then when I walked out with a piece of meat, well, I'm a vegetarian, but I walked out with a piece of meat. I said, this is a conservative hechsher. It's not a hechsher. So at that point.
Yeah, they got a lot of those in Boca.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they look like real meat markets, right? It looks okay, but.
Most of my kashrus issues, I go into the store. I think I see what I want. And I say, I'm rushing a little bit. I take this one, no, put it back. I just grab the one next to it. I end up at home and it's like, what? There's no hechsher on this.
Right.
But I thought, because you switched it and then. Yeah. Okay, so our question now is, where do we get?
What do you do with that meat, by the way?
You give it to the maid.
What if you don't have a maid?
the neighbor's maid. So,
Or the neighbor. If she isn't.
right.
That's what-
We're asking, where do we get the concept of two majorities from? Right? We see in Psachim that one majority was enough. So maybe it's talking about that there really is no majority here, because the doors of the city are opened. The Ka'asile Ruba Me'alma.
Ah, wow.
The Gemara says, no, that's not what we're dealing with. Even if we can't look at the whole world. 1 second, what's happening here? Oh, maybe what we're talking about is, the Gemara was suggesting that maybe the reason why that meat was kosher when you found it was because over there we also had two majorities. We had the majority of the stores in the city, and you also had the majority of the travelers that were coming through that also had kosher meat. The Gemara says, no, you don't have to say that. We didn't say that.
It's supposed to represent the rapist or something in the Mishnah.
It's just a comparison of how many people would be kosher, the ratio, most people would be kosher, and then we're comparing it back to the rapist in the Mishnah to know what's her status.
Okay.
Right. So the meat it isn't, it's the amount of stores that are being compared to the amount of people.
Ah.
All right. So the Gemara says, "My loss and this is a special halacha that's done not with kosher meat. The two majorities is only done when it comes to marriage. We have this extra stringency that we say that we need trey ruby when it comes to establishing a person's lineage to be able to get married and who they can marry. Yeah, it's a big sugya in Siman Yud Zayin and Ebenezer, the trey ruby. So what it's called. Two majorities, this one and that one.
Rabbi.
Yeah.
But, sorry, I didn't understand the premise. She's puzzle or kosher for what?
To marry a Kohen.
What would it matter if she was raped? No matter what, she can't marry a Kohen. No.
No. If she was raped by a regular Jewish man, kosher man, not the best midos, but of fine lineage, then she could still marry a Kohen. It's only if she lived with someone that she would have been forbidden to marry herself. For example, if he wasn't Jewish, or if he was a mamzer, or someone that a chalal or something, any of those things, then she would be forbidden to marry a Kohen.
That's different than rape. Living with
I just thought that.
their own.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to that difference of was she raped or did she do or was this done willingly?
Mhm.
That's a difference when it comes to a married woman that has relations with another man. If she did it willingly, then she can't stay with her husband, Kohen or not Kohen.
Right.
If she was raped, so then she can't stay with her husband that's a Kohen, but if her husband is not a Kohen, she can stay married. That's where that distinction shows up. But a non-married woman, then willingly or raped, can still marry a Kohen, as long as the fellow was a kosher lineage. And that's what our discussion is. A non-married woman that she lived with another man, we just don't know what their nature.
Wow.
Yeah.
She asked him afterwards,
Yeah.
what's your lineage? So
Right. It's be a good idea beforehand.
for him.
Stringency for Yochsen. Yeah. Yeah. I've had this. I mean, people, they've said they can't marry a Kohen. And they say, why can't you marry a Kohen? Well, they say, well, I had friends in college or whatever. They say, well, were they Jewish? They say, oh, maybe, yeah. And then they have to go back. They have to think about that. But if they were Jewish, then they can still marry a Kohen.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they have to to go through those details. Okay. What is that? Gufa was taught before that Gufa is the way we read.
Divorced, someone who's
Divorce is a problem.
cannot
Cannot marry a Kohen, right?
But if their spouse was Jewish, it doesn't matter. They
Right.
still can't marry.
Yeah, that has to do with being divorced. that doesn't just have to do with having the relations. There's two parts to this. There's the way the marriage ended, and then there's no marriage but just having relations.
Is there any negative impact on the man with relations with a non-Jew?
Doesn't say that. It says not halachically, but in Agada, yes, like it violates the covenant of there's other things, but not it wouldn't affect him in any sort of marriage, court type things. Gufa is how we return to discuss and analyze something that was taught to us by Amiraim. So who's the Amira here? Amar Rab Zera. Rab Zera says, "Kol kavua k'mechzal mechzadami bein lakula bein lachumra." We actually didn't quote that fully, but now we're quoting it fully. Rab Zera says that if there's something that's permanent, kavua, like the stores, they have a location. So then a doubt that arises that originates from a store itself, we say that that's from a permanent location. That is like 50-50. And we go lakula and lachumra by this. Well, how's that going to work? We have to see. Where does Rab Zera know this from? If you want to tell me that he knows this from the case of the kosher meat, the meat that was found and that was that was taken from one of those 10 stores and 9 were kosher, we said Sveika Yasser, that the meat is still Aser. Why? Because each one we look at it and we say 50-50. But if you find it, you follow the majority. Hasam lachumra, over there we're being strict. We don't have a kula there. We're saying that the meat is considered treif, even though 9 stores were kosher, because it originated in the store. Elamitesha tzvardim. 9 frogs. And then a frog apparently is not one of the animals that give off the tumah, but the sheretz, which is similar to the frog, another little creature that does give off tumah, was amongst them. And v'naga bechem, he touched either the frog or the sheretz. So v'eni idea bezimem naga, he doesn't know which one he touched. So we say sveki tame. It's a doubt. We say it's tame. But there were 9 that were tahar, the frogs. There were 9 that were tahar. Why do we say it's tahar? Well, because those frogs were in their location. So hasam nami lachamra, but that's also being strict. Reb Zera says it's even lenient. Where do we get this that we could be lenient? It's the opposite. There's 9 shratzim, 9 that are tamei, and there's 1 frog, and he touched one of them. He doesn't know which one. Ew.
Yeah, exactly.
So, whenever we have a doubt of tumah, so it depends on the location where the doubt. If it's in a private location, means there were less than 3 people there. So then we say that it's tamei. We learn this from Saita. A Saita, she is called tamei. It's not the same type of tumah, but it's because she lived with someone. But we call her tamei if she was in a private location. But if she was in a public location, then she's tar. So we learn that, we derive from that also to other types of tumah, including a sheretz, that if there was a doubt about what happened, did he touch it or not? So if it's in a rishus hayachid, we say that it's tamei, and if it's in a rishus harabim, we say that it's tar. It's the first.
If it's a majority, 9 out of 10.
Even if it's 9 out of 10, we're going to say tar. So 1 second. So what you see what we're doing over here? We're looking at each one and we're saying 50-50. Was it this one? Maybe yes, maybe no. Was it this one? Maybe yes. Maybe. You add up all the 50-50s, you're left with 50-50. So, you see, Reb Zera has a source that you could be lenient because it was kavua, because it was the doubt originated in something that was permanent. Where do we know this from the Torah? You have a pasuk that says, "Va'arav lai v'kamalav." There's a case by a murder, that murder has to be intentional for the punishment, for the death penalty. He needs to intend to have murdered this person. He was intending to murder someone else and he ended up missing and hitting the other guy. That's not, he won't get the punishment for that. For Rabbanan Amri, the Bei Rabbi Yanai, Prat L'Zerek Eben Lagav. It's actually excluding when someone throws a stone into a group of people. And in that group of people, we have Jewish people and non-Jewish people there.
We wanted,
Hey Chidami.
wanted to kill somebody. Though.
Yeah. Ilay Medika Tisha Knan and Vechad Yisrael. Let's say there's 9 non-Jewish people. He's not going to get the death penalty for that. He would only get the death penalty if he killed from the Jewish people. It's forbidden, of course. It's not. There's no leniency. It's just the punishment is different. 9 non-Jews and 1 Jew. Typically, the reason why he's not going to get the punishment is not because of 50-50. It's because of the majority. Inami palgo palga. But let's say it is 50-50. Half. There's 5 Jews and 5 non-Jews. What's going to be then? Well, Safek Navash Lakal. We can't give him the death penalty out of a doubt, right? We're not going to do that. We have a rule. It says B'tzilo Eida. Try to save the person, not try to be strict on capital punishment. It's 9 Jews and 1 non-Jew. The Havale Kanani Kavua, but nevertheless, because he was in his location, that non-Jew was there. That was his location. And it's not like someone left and got killed. We don't know which one it was. He was in his original location. So then, each person is going to be a 50-50. Now, what happened over here?
So there's no death penalty.
There would be no death penalty. Yeah, we're going to have to say that what's really happening here is that it has to do with the warning. How were they able to warn him? Because, I mean, we do know who died.
Also, if it was
That's not our question. The question is who he was intending for.
It seems to me if it was less than 50-50, there was even a 10% suffix because there was 1 Jew out of 10, 1 person out of 10 was not Jewish. Then because it's a capital case, even a small suffix would negate the death penalty. You know? There's a chance that he was trying to kill the non-Jew, and even if it's 1 out of 100, the fact that it's capital, you have to be sure. So that's enough. It doesn't have to be just 50-50, just even a smaller one.
Yeah. I don't know the answer. It's a good point. Okay. Okay, now we have a new statement over here. Going back to the Mishnah. Remember in the Mishnah we had what is that?
He gives me a trophy. I'm gonna hold him to it.
So Reb Chia Barashi says in the name of Rab, that's a student of Rab. He says, Allah like Rabbi Yossi in the Mishnah. Remember, Rabbi Yossi quoted Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri that says that if the majority of the city is kosher, then this girl is also kosher. Rav Chanan bar Rava Amar Rav, Rav Chanan bar Rava, I think he's the son-in-law of Rav. He says in the name of Rav, that was just a specific case. That's not the rule in general. Masav Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yirmiyah has a question. Sounded like that it was paskening like Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. He was paskening like that, even though there was only 1 majority. Don't we need 2 majorities? What's going on over here? That's going to be the halacha, but Tanan, but it was taught in the Mishnah. If they found a child that was just abandoned. So if the majority of that place are not Jewish, then we'll assume it's not Jewish. Yisrael, if the majority of that place is Jewish, then it's Yisrael. 50-50. Yisrael, we consider him a Jew. Rav says, what is this relevant for? That's only if you're obligated to sustain him. to continue supporting this child. But if you want him to get married, then lie. Then we can't. It doesn't just work like that. You need two majorities. Shmuel says this is relevant for if you have to remove a rubble that fell over him on Shabbos. That will say that he's Jewish, and you have to remove that on Shabbos. Question: I thought you needed two majorities, and over here he's passing like Rabbi Yossi with one majority. So it says, he's forgetting that we already established that case was a case where the wagons were coming through, and there were two majorities. What's happening? Rav Chanan bar Rava that says that this is not really the halacha. This was just one special time that was the halacha. But why is that only one special time? There was the wagons going through, two majorities. Man de masniha, le masniha. The one that taught this didn't teach that, and you get to choose which one. If there was only one majority, then this is only a halacha for that time. It's not a real halacha. But if we learn that the wagons were going through, then it would be the established halacha. Yeah, I guess we'll leave it here. We can go daven.
One teaches this, doesn't teach that. Let's see.
Man de masniha, le masniha. Ha means this. It could mean this or that.